We did not amend the fiscal framework. That means the fiscal framework that was tabled by the minister is the fiscal framework that was adopted. However, the budget report, in the same breath, he says members rejected it because of the VAT increase. Clarity is needed on that. And that is why I invited two members who sat in on the committee in Parliament today from different political parties, the EFF as well as Action SA, to help us make sense of what their understanding is of it. Alan Beasley is Action SA's Member of Parliament sitting in this committee. Sinao Tambo is also a Member of Parliament of the EFF sitting in this committee, also is the EFF's spokesperson. Alan, I'm going to start with you. What's your understanding of what was voted for today by the Select Committee?
First of all, thanks for having me. Greetings to you, greetings to your listeners, and greetings to my honourable member from the EFF. So the recommendation today was a recommendation that was put forward by Action SA, and our recommendation is that we're supporting the fiscal framework.
Before we speak about your, Alan, and I will give you an opportunity to tell us what your recommendation around the fiscal framework was. I just want to know, as a starting point, what is your understanding of what was voted for?
So what was voted for is that we voted that the fiscal framework and revenue proposals goes ahead, but there's a recommendation in the proposal that says there's going to be no tax increases and no VAT increases. So that was what was voted on. It's a recommendation of the committee, and that's what was voted on. So as things currently stand, there will be no VAT increase and no tax increases.
Okay, we're going to need to clear that up. You voted for the fiscal framework to go ahead as is, but you recommended no VAT increases.
We made recommendations, and the recommendations become part of the report that gets tabled to the National Assembly tomorrow, and the recommendations will become binding on the Minister of Treasury. He can't ignore the recommendations. The recommendations of Parliament, that's what we do.
Yeah, but that's only if the National Assembly votes for it, and the correct word there would be an amendment to the fiscal framework.
No, not at all. We happy with the proposal as it stands. It's a recommendation. So the recommendation is that on strict conditions that the VAT increases and tax increases are put on hold, and then the minister. Okay.
So the very last words of the chairperson, which I played there, which you listened to, was that the fiscal framework was voted for unamended. That was the very last words. I can replay it for you if you need me to.
I
for
heard
clarity.
You
heard him.
100%.
So it seems like you and the chairperson have a different understanding of what was voted for.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Okay.
I have the same thing. So it is, but there is a recommendation, and the recommendation becomes a recommendation of Parliament that has. Parliament can't make a recommendation and it just gets ignored.
But you voted for a fiscal framework today, right? The fiscal framework you voted for, which the chairperson says was unamended, contains a VAT increase.
It doesn't. I mean,
okay, you believe it doesn't. Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Let me pause you there. So now, what is your understanding as the EFF and as a member of that committee? What was voted for today?
Look, I think I could have greetings to you and greetings to your listeners and greetings to Alan. I think I would have allowed you to conduct this interview on your own, because your line of questioning on its own exposes the crux of the challenge that we had in the committee today, and the crux of the challenge of the understanding by Action SA of what they have supported. There are two separate processes here. There's a committee report, which is reflecting on the submissions by stakeholders and interactions with SARS and National Treasury. There's a fiscal framework and revenue proposal document which was tabled by the Minister of Finance. The VAT hikes lie within the fiscal framework and revenue proposals. And the only way to get rid of VAT hikes within the fiscal framework and revenue proposals is to amend the fiscal framework and revenue proposals. And that's the opportunity that the Standing Committee of Finance had today. Action SA rejected that opportunity and chose an option of a second report, a committee report, to make a recommendation to National Treasury to look for alternatives to a VAT hike within 30 days and come back and report to the Standing Committee of Finance. Now, this is not binding in any way. It doesn't alter the fiscal framework and revenue proposal in any way. In actual fact, in 30 days, National Treasury can come and say they did not find any other feasible mechanism to generate a shortfall of 28 billion in revenue. What will happen then? What will be the consequences? Because the fiscal framework and revenue proposals were not amended today. They might be adopted tomorrow with the support of Action SA. So this is the exact point we were trying to make, that the money bills and the Amendments Procedure and Other Related Matters Act allows for the amendment of the fiscal framework and revenue proposals. Now, the chairperson of the Finance Committee, the trip he just played now, made that comment at the end of his trip deliberately because at the end he knows that the fiscal framework and revenue proposals has passed in committee with VAT hikes included. A separate report, which is not binding, which is inconsequential, contains the proposal by Action SA and is ultimately extremely meaningless, because what if National Treasury comes back and says we have not found alternative mechanisms to replace a VAT hike? What then? You can't reverse the process of the fiscal framework, which has already been adopted. And we have been at pains to explain this, and get quite late.
So now, your understanding is that this fiscal framework is a separate consideration from the budget report.
Yes, there's a budget. There's a report of the committee.
What is the difference between the budget report and the fiscal framework?
The fiscal framework was tabled by the Minister of Finance, and it contains proposals on how we must generate revenue to fund expenditure and social programs, to fund the infrastructure development, and also to sustain the social relief distress grant, amongst many other things. Now, this is something that exists as a mechanism to plan the fiscal policy of South Africa, and it will be subsequently be followed up by the Division of Revenue Bill and Appropriations Bill.
Sure.
Now, these are things that the Standing Committee of Finance had powers to amend today. The committee report is a report that reflects on the engagements we've had with stakeholders.
What is the legal effect? What is the legal effect of the committee report and adopting the committee report?
Look, it's a report that adopts submissions we receive from stakeholders on their reflection on the fiscal framework and revenue proposals. It's a report that reflects what SAR's responses to those stakeholder submissions were, and it reflects as well the need for proposals within that. So there's the distinction we need to make is that it is not legally binding to the fiscal framework. It's two separate documents.
Yeah. I'm sorry for interjecting here, and I don't want to be reductionist, but it sounds like to me you're describing the adoption of meeting minutes instead of something that is
thank you so much.
That has no legal effect.
That is exactly
but
what
hold on, my question then is, if stakeholders say we reject VAT and that is noted in a report and the report is adopted, surely the legal effect of that should be a rejection of VAT.
Our duty as members of the Standing Committee on Finance was to take that rejection of stakeholders, the majority of whom rejected the VAT hike, to inform whether we accept the fiscal framework and revenue proposals as they stand or whether we amend them. We failed at that duty today because of the African National Congress Action SA and the Invita Freedom Space.
Alan, do you agree with Sinao on that last point, that the report that was adopted rejected VAT, and the responsibility of members today was to then transpose that rejection of VAT into the fiscal framework, and instead it accepted a report that rejects VAT but accepts a fiscal framework that contains VAT, a VAT increase? Do you agree with him on that framing?
No, so we got taken legal advice and we're happy with the recommendation, and it's going to be a binding recommendation on Parliament. But I also just want to take a step back where we are. So the EFF and Action SA, we don't disagree on the principles of no VAT and no tax. But you see the problem, and I've said this in Parliament before, and I'm sure the EFF guy, my honourable friend, and he speaks, he's a quality human being, and we agree in principle on the same thing, that there should be no VAT and no tax. But the biggest problem that we faced with in this country is the GNU has been a complete farce. And if the budget was rejected and went back to the starting board today, we're suffering massive unemployment in our country. You know, it's a reason why I've gone into Parliament, is the unemployment. There's hunger out there. And as a country, we cannot afford for our budget to become a political soccer ball when people are hungry and people are losing their jobs.
So you think there's an urgency to getting the budget passed?
No, and that's why we put forward these recommendations, because if it was kicked into touch, that the markets and that would, because it will start all over, and you can see the farce at the GNU is, and my EFF and my colleague will agree. And the reason why we're here today is not because of Action SA, not because of the EFF, it's because the GNU has failed to they've got 70% in things. So if this thing was kicked into touch, it will be kicked starting from the beginning again. So we've made recommendations. We've got legal advice on the recommendations that they will be binding on Parliament.
Okay,
and the committee,
just this question,
and
Alan.
Just a quick one, and we're looking for 28 billion. So it's not a massive amount.
Sure. Sure.
And SARS has been given 4 billion extra that wasn't in any of the budget reports. And according to the SARS commissioner, there's 800 billion on the table. And the SARS commissioner said,
I want to pause there because it's getting into the substance of things. I just want us to get clarity on procedure first. And I'm glad you say that you have legal advice on whether or not the adoption of the report has binding effect on the fiscal framework. You say it does. The EFF says it doesn't. That is ostensibly either to be determined by the Speaker tomorrow or by a court later.
Correct.
If tomorrow the Speaker says, guys, the fiscal framework in front of me that I am reading has a VAT increase in it, and that is the fiscal framework that the committee had adopted, and that is the fiscal framework that the National Assembly has to vote on. Will Action SA participate in that vote? Will they vote against the framework, or will they walk out of the vote?
So if I can just be clear on this, and it's been misconstrued, and mainly by the DA. The EFF haven't misconstrued what we've been saying. The DA has been misconstruing. We've never supported a VAT increase, and we've never supported a tax increase. We've voted against that, and I've spoken against those today. So if for whatever reason, between now and tomorrow, that changes, Action SA won't support it, because we've been categorically, since day one, we said we won't support a tax increase, we won't support a VAT increase, but we're saying the economy mustn't come to a standstill because the GNU has been unable to manage our country. And if Action SA had to be part of the solution, we will be part of the solution, because we won't stand by and watch people losing their jobs and people suffering from hunger and grants not being paid. And to me, that's the greatest tragedy that nobody's talking about here, that if this budget got kicked into touch, there would have been real consequences. And Action SA saying we would rather be a part of the solution and fixing the country than rather rejecting. We call ourselves a constructive opposition, and where we can be constructive, we will be constructive, and we believe we've played a constructive role today for the betterment of South Africa.
Yeah. So now, given the confusion around process, procedure, and rules, do you think that the chairperson of the committee, as a member of the committee, which you are, adequately managed that? And I ask that because that ostensibly will become a part of the contention in the National Assembly tomorrow, when there is a question of, does the report have a legal effect on the fiscal framework or not? What will the EFF's position be tomorrow on the question of the report's effect on the fiscal framework?
Look, I think our position will be the same as it has been in the Standing Committee of Finance today, that the legislation that guides us when it relates to either accepting or amending the fiscal framework and revenue proposals is the Money Bills Amendment Procedure and Other Related Matters Act. There's no report that can affect any other amendment to the fiscal framework. So a committee report can't be perceived as having powers to effect changes to the fiscal framework and revenue proposals. That is patently unlawful. There's no legislation that allows for that. So there's no correlation between the committee report and the fiscal framework. And I think on your question as to whether the chair handled the process appropriately, I think the fact that maybe there was a multitude of things that overwhelmed the chairperson of the sitting today, the fact that the situation we're in is unprecedented. They've never been confronted with a situation where a budget can actually be contested and actually meaningfully be amended, because they've always existed in the context of the majority. And I think that was part and parcel of the reason of convoluting two separate documents that are not interrelated in terms of whether they affect each other in a binding manner. So I think we would have to reflect as well on the poor handling of the session by the chairperson because of a lack of proper interpretation of the legislation that was supposed to guide us today.
Yeah. Alan, did the ANC and Action SA come to an agreement?
About what, sorry?
On the question of VAT. Did the ANC and the Action SA come to an agreement on the question of VAT?
So I've been involved in the two discussions we've met with the ANC, and we've made it quite clear in the beginning, and if one goes on record, since day one when the budget was presented, we said we will not accept a tax increase and we will not accept a VAT increase. The DA, on the other hand, they said we'll support a VAT increase, and then they started linking anything in the budget. So they talk with two.
No, but my question is specifically about the conversation between Action SA and the ANC. the Action SA and the ANC have been in negotiations. The statements that have been coming out is that an agreement has been reached, and that Action SA said that the ANC said they will support the Action SA's proposal. Is that indeed true? Did the ANC and Action SA reach an agreement?
Yeah, so the only thing we reached agreement on is that Action SA would not support a tax increase and would not support a VAT increase, and the ANC agreed to that. Because
in a meeting, the ANC agreed with you that they agree with your position of not supporting a VAT increase.
We put that on the table, and we said that's a red line for us, and we're going to put that recommendation forward, and it's up to them to
So
support.
They noted your position. They didn't agree with your position. Am I understanding you better now?
No, well, noted, agreed. I mean, it's
No, they don't mean the same thing. So which is it? That they note your position or that they agree with your position?
No, they agreed with our position.
Okay. I just spoke to the ANC a few minutes before you guys came on, and they said they have no position that's different from a VAT increase position. They support it and won't waver from it. So which is it?
No, well, I don't know who you spoke to.
I spoke to the ANC spokesperson, actually.
Yeah, well, the spokesperson wasn't the meeting I was in. Yeah, so I can't talk on behalf of the ANC. I can only talk on behalf of Action SA, and so I can't talk on behalf of the ANC. No.
So now, just lastly, should the budget fail tomorrow?
And sorry, just to highlight, if I was listening to the chairperson, and I must. It's been a hectic day today. So I was listening to the chairperson, and he categorically stated there too that there's no VAT increases because 98% of the public participation came back, no VAT increase.
But he also categorically stated that the fiscal framework that was voted for has no amendments to it.
No, he said there's going to be no VAT increase. So that's what.
No, you're right. He said both those things, which is actually very confusing.
But it might be confusing. But for me, I've got clarity. We've got legal advice, and we're happy with it. Yeah.
Sure. So now, just lastly, should the budget not pass tomorrow, this process might have to go back to the same committee. National Treasury might have to reconsider. The minister might have to come in, might have to consider the recommendation for amendments or proposal for amendments. The committee will have to then do the work all over again of considering these things more slowly. Time was of an issue here. It made no sense why this sitting happened the day before the other sitting. I guess historically it was never contentious. It passed through smoothly, and therefore it was not considered that it would be an issue. What is the view of the EFF of what should transpire if the budget vote on the fiscal framework, if the vote on the fiscal framework does not pass tomorrow?
Look, I think it should come back to the Standing Committee on Finance. And I think we should open up, even if it is a minimal amount of time for stakeholders to continue to make the contributions that are necessary. But I think something that must be emphasized much more importantly, we might need to have a stronger role of legal advisory capacity within the committee so that we have an appreciation of the legislation that guides the process. It is extremely unfortunate that my colleague from the Action SA, whom I enjoy very much, might have possibly been hoodwinked along with their political party by the African National Congress because they are not speaking the same language that the Action SA is speaking with regards to the adoption of the fiscal framework and the new proposals today and the committee report. If you were to juxtapose the same way that you have just done now, what they are saying in public and what Action SA is saying in public, those are two diametrically differently and opposed things, which shows that there might have been a level of taking advantage of either a lack of experience in dealing with this sphere of government in parliament or dealing with legislation of this nature. So there needs to be serious input made by legal advisors of parliament budgetary office possibly as well, and people who have experience in the matter, because it is unfortunate that we have to clarify procedural matters that might lead to misconceptions and misunderstandings of what people have supported and what they have rejected simultaneously.
Yeah. So now, thank you so much for your time. Ellen, thank you so much for your time. Really do appreciate it.
I'm welcome, and nice chatting to both of you, and good evening to your listeners.
Thank you very much. Taking your reactions to this, give me a call, 086 000 2032, 086